This morning, we are going to talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and I put it as the path to ultimate happiness. The Noble Eightfold Path, normally we call it either the Noble Eightfold Path or the middle path. But I also call it the path to ultimate happiness because the Noble Eightfold Path is one of the four noble truths. Okay? The four noble truths are dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, magga. Or dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the path to the cessation of dukkha. Now, the path to the cessation of dukkha, the Noble Eightfold Path, ultimately brings us to the supreme happiness called Nibbana. We say Nibbana Paramang Sukhang. That's why this path, the Noble Eightfold Path, would eventually bring us to the highest happiness or the supreme happiness of Nibbana. That's why I call it the path to ultimate happiness. Now, you actually don't have to wait until the end of the path to realize the ultimate happiness, because the path itself will bring you some degree of happiness along the way. And at the end of the path, not at the exact end of the path, but at the tail of the path, you will realize the supreme happiness. So that supreme happiness of the Nibbana is or what I should say is the ultimate happiness is embedded in the path. So the path to ultimate happiness actually is the path of ultimate happiness. Okay. Now, so we are going to talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. Before going further, I think all of us know about this story about the Buddha preaching to the 5 ascetics. Soon after the Buddha's enlightenment in Bodhi, the Buddha surveyed the world and he decided to go to near park at Isipitana to preach to his 5 companions before he became the Buddha. So he arrived at near park at Isipitana and preached to these 5 ascetics. And the content of this sermon was called the Dhamma-chakra Sutta. Dhamma, we all know what is Dhamma. Chakra means the wheel, the Dhamma Chakra, the wheel of the Dhamma. Pavatana, turning or setting into motion. So sometimes it's translated as setting into motion the wheel of the Dhamma. Now, in this sutta, the Buddha mentioned the 4 noble truths. Okay? Chattari Arya Satchani, the 4 noble truths. And what are the 4 noble truths? I mentioned to you just now. Dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, magga. Dukkha, or some traditionally translated as suffering. Then later scholars like Wapolo Rahula thinks that this word suffering may not convey the full meaning of dukkha, so he translated it as unsatisfactoriness. And now you have Bhikkhu Bodhi. So, sorry, I think it's not Bhikkhu Bodhi. Another Bhikkhu who translated it as a stress. So whatever it is, today English dictionary allow the word dukkha. You can always maintain the word dukkha. Okay? It basically says that the life in this earth, our mundane life here, is not satisfactory. It's not a perfect one. And in fact, if you look at all the religious teachings in the world today, all religious teachings actually acknowledge this. Even though Buddhism expanded on this a lot. But I noticed all the other religions in the world also accepted that our life in this world is dukkha. That is why they offer heaven as a better alternative. Okay, and further uh, further uh, threaten you with hell. Okay, so they give you the push and pull factor, the push factor of dukkha and the pull factor of the heaven to lead you somewhere else, out of this world of dukkha. Okay, then the Buddha mentioned the cause of dukkha. Okay, all of us know the cause of dukkha, craving, and then cessation of dukkha. Now, cessation of dukkha means it leads us to the ultimate happiness of Nibbana. The ultimate happiness of Nibbana. Nibbana is described as Nibbana Paramang Sukhang. Buddha, Nibbana is the highest bliss, or Nibbana is the highest happiness, or Nibbana is the ultimate happiness. Then the Buddha, like a great physician, after telling you what's your problem, what's the cause of your problem, there's a way to cure your problem, he gave a prescription. That prescription, we call it the path leading to the cessation of dukkha, which we are going to talk about today. Since there are 8 paths in it, we call it the Atangika Marga. Atangika means 8, okay? 8 noble paths. Now, another name for this 8 noble path is called the middle path, or Majjhima Patipada. Okay? It's the noble path, the middle path, Majjhima Patipada. Why it is called Majjhima Patipada? Because mentioned in this Dhammacakra Pavattana Sutta that there are 2 extremes which we should avoid and walk on this middle path. Okay? Of course, when you walk on the road, you don't walk on in the middle of the road. Okay? This is a spiritual path, and we are on the normal traffic roads. Please avoid the middle path. Okay? Now, the 2 extremes are hedonism or devotion to sensual pleasure, sensual enjoyment. And it is described in the sutta that sensual pleasure is hino. Hino means low, hina. Malay word is hina. Okay? Vulgar, dhammo, or base, B-A-S-E, base. And common, putujaniko. Putujana refers to normal people. Putujaniko means common. And atta, not beneficial. Okay? Arya means noble. In Buddhism, Arya actually is the Aryan race, but Arya is used in the normal language. It refers to noble. So, Arya means it's not noble and deprived of benefit. Anatta samhito is not beneficial. So the Buddha says this hedonism is not the way. Okay? And the other extreme is the devotion to self-mortification, which is dukkha, and which is anarya, and which is atta samhito. Now, this self-mortification in Chinese is normally translated as 苦行. And in Pali, sometimes we have these monks who practice this. We call it the Dhutanga monks. But actually, if it is really a kind of self-mortification or self-torture, do you think they will continue to do that? Actually, it is a kind of self-mortification or self-torture when we look at them. But to them, maybe they enjoy it. It's just like if you look at a badminton trainee training very hard, and you say, why is he torturing himself, training 16 hours a day? Okay? But he is treating it as a practice. Okay? So don't think that those people who practice self-mortifications are very sad and upset, full of misery. Not really that way. That's why they could continue practicing self-mortification for a long, long time. In ancient India, even until today, some of the this self-motivation practice. For example, they erect one short pole in the middle of the river or sea, okay, and a longer pole in the middle of the sea. And this practitioner, he will stand on the shorter pole and hold his hand, and his hand up onto the upper pole. And then his eyes will be gazing at the sun and follow the direction of the sun from morning to noon. Without food, without water. So you just practice like that. Day in and day out, you practice like that. And some of them eventually fall down into the river and die. And they say they go and get enlightened with Brahma. Okay? Now the Buddha says all this is useless. Go to the middle path. So the Buddha mentioned the Eightfold Noble Path, right understanding, or I translated it as right seeing, then right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right efforts, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Now, for ease of discussion, later scholars have categorized for us for easier understanding. You see, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This has to do with the way we live our life daily. So this has to, we call it sila or discipline or morality. Okay. Then the other one, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This refers, the effort here refers to mental effort. Okay. This right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This has got to do with the mind. Okay. This is mental training. To train our mind to what? To reach the stage of concentration, or we call it samadhi. Okay, samadhi. And when our mind is concentrated, then we are able to see things more clearly. When we see things more clearly and we have feelings which is more kind, which is categorized under samadhi or right understanding, and samma sankappa, right thought. And this we call it panya or wisdom. Okay. So I will briefly discuss these three, dividing these 8 into 3 for easier discussion, 3 categories: sila, samadhi, panya. Okay. Normally we start with sila first. We will explain later why we start with sila first. Okay. Now, before going further, the word sama, English translated as right, Chinese translated as zhen. So to me, this is a good translation. We all know sama means perfect. Sama sambuddho, the perfectly enlightened one. So it's perfect or right. Okay? Well, there was a monk from the Buddhist Vihara. He translated it as harmonious. Why? I don't understand. But that's how the different translations are now emerging as we have more and more scholars, more and more speakers. Okay. Now, sila, morality, as I mentioned to you just now, covers 3 aspects: right speech, right action, right livelihood. So we go one by one. Go by right speech. To practice this path of ultimate happiness. First, there are 4 wrong speeches that we should not get into. Number 1 is false speech. Today, with the advent of this social media, there are plenty of false speech, okay? Plenty of scams, plenty of rumors, and sometimes we are parties with without realizing it because we share them. Okay, so from the modern context, false speech now is not only limited to our own verbal false speech when we talk to others, but how we spread them in social media, I think is becoming a bigger menace. Okay, then you have the harsh speech. Sometimes you get very angry, so we scolded people, and this also you can find in social media. Cursing people, calling people by calling names, calling people by all sorts of names. These are all wrong harsh speeches, which we should avoid, which the Buddha advised. These are the wrong speeches. Now, actually, if you think about it, sometimes parents also scolded their children with all sorts of bad words. Or sometimes bosses scolding their subordinate with all sorts of bad words. And if you analyze further, actually the cause of these bad words or harsh speeches is the person himself, not the children, not the subordinate. Why they scolded with bad words? Because the children misbehave. Why children misbehave? Because parents don't know how to educate them, don't know how to teach them. Okay? Then subordinates do not perform well. Then we scold them. Why they do not perform well? Because as a boss, you don't know how to train them, you don't know how to lead them, you don't know how to guide them. So there's a lot of mess in your office. We always say it's like a circus. So you get very angry and start scolding people. So actually one of the ways to reduce that harsh speech is to make sure that you get all your things in order around you. Okay. Then of course you have this divisive speech, or we call it the slandering speech, or talking bad about other people, bad mouth other people. Then the next one is frivolous speech, useless speeches. And today you can find in the social media plenty of frivolous speeches and actions also. For example, you keep spreading or what I call forwarding, okay, messages which is serve no purposes, okay, or forwarding scanty rest photographs everywhere. Okay, these are all frivolous speech or actions. Okay, in fact, we lost our time, a lot of time here. Now, instead of the 4 wrong speeches, the Buddha advised us to give good speech. This is mentioned as piyavacha, or to speak well, in the 4 sanghawatu, the 4 leadership qualities, dana, piyavacha, beneficial actions, and equanimous. Okay? So there are 4 sanghawatu. One of them is to speak well. And we also know from the Mangala Sutta, it's mentioned as Subhashita Jayavacha Etang Mangalam Uttama. It's well-spoken words. And what are well-spoken words? Well, to console people, to encourage people. You know, when you encourage people, some kind of hormones in our mind, and then we are more energized and we can perform better. And that's what we always do to our children. But sometimes we forget to do that after we become old adults. Okay, instead we scold people most of the time. Okay, then you praise. Same thing when we used to do that to the children, we encourage them, we praise them, and they perform better and better. Okay? But sometimes we forget to praise. Instead, we condemn people. Then care. Okay? Now, when monks travel from long distances, came over to the Buddha, pay a visit to the Buddha, the Buddha showed his care by inquiring how was their stay, how the kuti, how they stay, and how was the journey? Was it very tiring to walk all the way here? And how was your arms round? Do you get enough food to eat? So the Buddha showed his care. So when monk visitors who came to the Buddha first inquired about this thing. The Buddha did not ask, how was your jhana? How is your jhana? Your jhana, what degree already? He did not begin by asking them what is their spiritual practice, but the care. Okay, same thing lah. If in our Buddhist societies, if visitors come to our Buddhist societies, we have all these good words, care, praise, encourage, and console. I'm sure people like to come to us. Okay? Then, of course, the next one is right action. Killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. This will be dealt with mostly under 5 precepts. Today, I think I will speak this. No need to go into further details. Then we have the right livelihood. There are mentioned here 4 livelihood which are considered wrong livelihood. Slaughtering, especially animals for food or for fun, okay, or we call it hunting, and then prostitution, human trafficking, then liquor and poison, and then weapons. Okay, you know, today the world is in turmoil because there are a lot of weapon manufacturers, weapon merchants, selling weapons all over the world. And how do you sell weapons? You must create wars. So you create wars all over. They have lobbies all over the world to create a market for weapons. The market for weapon is called war. Okay, now, this is very unfortunate. That's why in socially engaged Buddhism, there's a lot of effort put in to talk about reduction of weapons. Okay? Now, we are done with sila or morality, or I would rather call it discipline, self-discipline. And with next one, we go to the samadhi, or the concentration or the development of the mind. Samadhi or concentration or development of the mind entails 3 aspects. Number 1 is our right mental effort. Number 2 is right mindfulness, and number 3 is right concentration. Now, mental effort. We must have the mental effort to prevent the arising of bad thoughts. Bad thoughts can come to us, but before it arises, the moment we notice it, we make an effort not to let it arise. That's called mental effort. Then, for example, you see your neighbor come back with a new BMW, then the bad thoughts suddenly arise. Don't know where he got his money. How he got all this money? Bad thought arise. So you must prevent that bad thoughts arising. But if you have a good thoughts, the thoughts of mudita, happiness, you say, oh, his neighbor is coming back with a new car. Hey, congratulations to him, man. Then you feel happy. Actually, he earned the money, but you feel happy, You are taking advantage. But a lot of people don't know how to take advantage. And instead, we feel very bad about your neighbor. See? Then we eliminate the bad thoughts already arises. Sometimes, well, we wanted to prevent it, but it already arises. So what we can do is, we want to remind ourselves, make a mental effort to get rid of these bad thoughts. Then the other opposite is arising of good thoughts. When you see something, you want that good thoughts to arise. For example, you pass by a bank and you see some beggars sitting outside the bank. Suddenly you have that arising of good thoughts. Oh, he needs help. I need to help him. That's called arising of good thoughts. Okay? Sometimes people can get bad thoughts. Well, he's a nuisance to the bank. He's dirtying this place. Bad thoughts can arise. But on the other hand, you can have good thoughts. So I must help him. So arising of good thoughts. But important thing is also to reinforce these good thoughts that has already arisen. Most of the time, we, especially doing good, we have the good thoughts arising, but after that, it was not maintained or reinforced and it dissipate very fast. So many times, we want to do some good things, okay? Or we want to give some donation to this fellow. Yeah, the thoughts arise, but wait, I'm not busy now, I'll do it later. Then later you forget about it. So same thing, you see that like you wanted to help him, then after that you hesitate for a while, then the thought disappears. Okay? Then you didn't do it. So these mental right efforts entails us to wash our mind so that we can make the right effort. And how we wash our mind, we must have right mindfulness. Okay? Mindfulness would eventually lead us to the attainment of concentration. So this is the importance of mindfulness. Okay? Mindfulness, sati, okay? Right, mindfulness. And what is sati? Okay? Well, many times people say mindfulness, mindful, just watch. So much so, mindfulness is equate with watch, or just watch your breath coming in, your breath going out. But I think that is a limited understanding of mindfulness sati. What is sati? In the Buddha Gosha's analysis, in his Atas Salini, he mentioned by it people recollect, or itself recollect, or it is just recollection. It overcomes confusions. Means the quality, the characteristic of sati means recollection. Be able to recollect. So to be able to recollect means to build up your experience. So this is very important point. If you have good thoughts, the good thoughts arise. You collect that good thoughts. And the next time another good thoughts come in. So your keep this good thoughts will accumulate. And if your mind is always filled with these good thoughts, then it will not diffuse or go into confusion. Okay. Now, another characteristic mentioned here, sati implies non-floating away of the subject. Non-floating of something. When your mind is mindful of something, you are mindful of that. You are mindful of your breath. You are mindful of the breath. So it takes hold of the material present, takes hold of the present moment, not for the fun of it, but by selecting and furthering that which is wholesome and inhibiting that might impede one's spiritual progress. So sati also entails selecting what is wholesome and what is not wholesome. That's why later on you can understand why the Thanisaro Bhikkhu, just now I remember I mentioned Bodhi, Bhikkhu Bodhi, not Bhikkhu Bodhi, Thanisaro Bhikkhus. Thanisaro Bhikkhus, you translated the word wisdom into discernment, able to discern, able to separate, to discriminate what is good and what is not good. Okay, so this is a function of sati. Okay, now by non-floating away of the subject, by focusing, means just as a treasurer of the king, they have to give an example here, just a treasurer of a king who guards his tenfold treasure, both early and late, makes the king take note and remembers the royal treasure. So also sati makes us take note and remember that which is wholesome. So sati or mindfulness means has a characteristic of taking note and remember what is wholesome, what is good, what is kusala. Okay? So it's a recollection. Then you give another example of the function of sati to separate, to discern what is good and what is bad, and prevent what is bad from coming up. Okay, So that give an example, just as the counselor or universal monarch who knows what is disadvantageous and what is advantageous, remove the disadvantages and promotes the advantages. So also Sati scrutinizes the way of the disadvantages and advantageous factors, and by deciding that that misconduct in body, speech, and mind is disadvantageous, we remove these disadvantageous factors, and by deciding what is good conduct in body, speech, and mind, and promote these advantages. So it has got like a advisor, okay, to us, instead of saying the counselor of a universal monarch, Sati to us tell us what is advantageous or what is kusala and what is not kusala. And we promote the kusala, and we try to reduce the akusala. So it involves inspection. Okay? Now, of course, to practice mindfulness, there must be some methodology. And in the Theravada tradition, we have this 4 basic mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mental processes, and mindfulness of objects of qualities or dharma. Okay, this word dharma here has got a different interpretation of meanings. That's why in the mindfulness of body, which is commonly used, we start with an object where we try to focus on, and that object, usually we choose a very neutral object and an object which everyone can experience. Okay? As I mentioned earlier, Sati also involves recollection. Therefore, Sati involves experience and something that everybody knows and talk about or experience is breathing. So we use breathing. Of course, we have other methods like scanning your whole body or wash your bodily parts and so on. So these are all, I call it techniques to develop mindfulness. Now, once we have learned how to be mindful, you can concentrate better on the object at hand that you have selected, and we can reduce our other temptations. Okay? Then, but Sati is just what I call discernment or concentration. But we need to go a little bit further. When we learn more about the object and its nature, and then we become absorbed into it, so we call it concentration. So when we reach Samma Samadhi or right concentration, by it, mind is fixed on the object and not distracted. So now you talk about concentration. This needs continuous concentration. So in Buddhism today, we see that many people are doing many things which are not mentioned in the Noble Eightfold Path. But we still can relate them to the Noble Eightfold Path. For example, we do a lot of chanting. You know, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, you chant Amitabha. To me, you chant Amitabha all the time. Then the Amitabha is your object of concentration. Then you enter into it, absorb into it. So it is a way of training the mind also, okay? Or even a sutta chanting. There are some people, if you spend your time focusing or chanting or doing chanting, then your mind is focused on the content of the chant. Your mind is infused with these good thoughts. So this is also a way of chanting. A way of concentration. Well, it may not be exactly the mindfulness techniques that we talk about, but you can consider it as para techniques, okay, or semi techniques. Okay? So by definition, when our mind is concentrated or right concentration, then our mind is not distracted and not sleepy, not lazy, not in activities. Okay, this is the concentration that we would like to attain. Now we look at Sama Samadhi in daily life. Of course, when people practice Sama Samadhi, the ultimate aim is to attain Nibbana. If not Nibbana, at least, people say at least first jhana. Okay? So this is a spiritual practice. But for us, a lot of us who are laymen, who are not really engrossed into that spiritual practice, or rather not thinking that by practicing this, I will attain Nibbana or first jhana, then we must practice this Sama Samadhi in our daily life and see whether it is useful for us or not. Okay? For example, when we are listening to the Dhamma, are we listening attentively with concentration? Are we focused on what we are doing now? Or are we listening while our mind is wandering off to somewhere else? So this is an example. Okay? Now, also in our daily life, are we focused on one thing and do it well at one time? Today, multitasking is making our mind more and more distracted. Yesterday, I listened to a talk, and it was mentioned that one of the biggest 4 challenges of the people today is distraction. Because our today's world, with social media, with the technology, with so many things around us, so many things are fed to us, so we cannot really do one thing well. So how many of us spend more than 1 hour on our handphone a day? Distracted, 1 hour gone already. And that's not only the time that you spend there, because in between the time that you spend on, when your mind wander off to that 1 hour, there are much more energy already diffused. That's why it's so very difficult for us to do successfully in one thing today. So we need to focus, to ask ourselves whether we are practicing Sama Samadhi or not. Sometimes we say we can't finish a task because of too much distraction. Distractions nowadays can come in many forms that I mentioned just now. Those days when I was in the office, the most frequent distraction is from the visitors, okay? Or for unforeseen phone calls and things like that. Okay? Well, of course, we can ask your PA to stop this and stop that, but we ourselves sometimes like to be distracted sometimes, okay? So that we can take the stress from our current job. But by keep ourselves distracted, we actually achieve less. Okay? But today's distraction is not necessarily a physical distraction from other people. It is our own mental distraction. That's why some people say learn the Dhamma. But we hardly read any books on the Dhamma or hardly listen anything on the Dhamma. So how to learn Dhamma? So important thing is persistent and continuous in doing one thing well. Then we can achieve something. In the West, when a PhD student finishes a thesis, then that same thesis will be explored further by many other students, subsequent students. That's why with that persistent and continuous effort, they would always come up with something very useful. But not in what I observed in Malaysia. You can do a thesis, PhD or a master, and you have a few copies bound, and then you put that into the library, and that's about it. That's all. Nobody else will continue your research. Somebody else come along to do another research. You can produce 600 PhDs 1 year, but it's no point because each one is doing a topic with no continuity. That is the problem. Okay, I experienced it myself because when I was doing my research in University Malaya, I noticed that after my research was done, it has been kept there until today. Okay, nobody else continued. I think that's our problem. Okay? As a group also, we cannot persist and consistently do our job. Okay, we have finished with Sila and Samadhi. Now we go to Panya, or wisdom. Samadhi is the development of the mind. But you develop the mind for what? We come to wisdom. Okay? Develop the mind so that we have wisdom. So we have right speech, two elements here, right seeing and right thoughts. Now, why I call it right seeing? See things as they are. Okay? Yatha Buddhadasana, and not what them to be. You see, when we see things, we always assume that thing is what we see as the ultimate truth. In reality, it is not the ultimate truth. Give an example. If you look at your own skin, now that is what you see, normally what you see. Everybody see like that, that's not our skin. But nowadays with technology, with our knowledge, we explode it, then you find that there are simply a lot of pores, a lot of holes. Our body is not even permeous. It's impermeous. We think it's impermeous, but actually it's permeous. Water can go inside into our body also. That's why in the ancient day, Chinese say, Hong Sik. Actually, it's true also, no? The wind can enter your body, the water can enter your body, but our skin is not like a plastic, okay? But we think it is, because we are so used to seeing it like this. But of course, when Buddhism says, Buddhism not talking about seeing your skin, Buddhism is talking about the whole ecology of life, the whole purpose of life. You want to see the true meaning of this. And this, you have to develop your mind to the extent that you can see that. Okay. Now, when we say Yatha Buddhadasana, or see things as they really are, sometimes we assume that there is something there that is true, that only thing we can't see properly. So by removing all the mess around it, then we could see it properly. But that's not actually the case, because there's nothing there. It is always in a state of flux. Okay, so when we say see things as they really are, we actually want to see the processes going on. So if we understand anicca, there is no such thing as they really are. What they really are processes or flux. Okay? So in the Buddhist Sutta, it's very clear about life. We are not talking about seeing your skin or seeing things that we can see physically with our eyes. We are seeing the truth of life. The truth of life here is the Dukkha, Samudaya, Nirodha, Marga, okay, which are conditioned. Okay, then that is the real meaning of seeing the truth of Dukkha. Okay, and seeing what? Seeing Dukkha, Anicca, Anatta. Okay? And then right thoughts. Okay, there are three thoughts that are considered as right thoughts. Number one is the thoughts of detachment. You know, we are so attached to so many things in our life that creates a lot of problems. But when we have right thoughts, then we have less problem, we have better happiness. Give an example of a common detachment or attachment in our daily life. We are all attached to ourselves, and by extension, our own opinions. So we are all attached to our own opinions. So in a company or in a society or in any organizations, people quarrel usually not because of anything, but because of opinions. We couldn't agree to something. Okay? So if we can have the right thoughts that, well, I am entitled to my opinion, but you are also entitled to your opinion. I think my opinion is the best. You also think your opinion is the best. So we must. The problem is we cannot, when we have to agree together, then we cannot agree together because your opinion and my opinion are opposite. Then we quarrel. And that's a problem. Okay? So I give an example. In the Yayasan Buddhist Malaysia, which I'm heading, we were discussing whether we wanted to give some donations to the government hospital. Well, I say no. My opinion, government hospital, no. Government should help us, not we help the government. Okay, we have to get together our resources and help other parties, but not the government hospitals. But the majority of my committees felt otherwise. They are also entitled to their opinions. They say we should help. So I go along and agree to it. Okay. So I always say we are all entitled to our opinions, but don't get attached to our opinions. And a lot of things can be solved. Okay. Then another example. Now you see elections coming. The moment I don't get nominated, then I start firing my party. Okay. Because I'm attached to that post. I think that post belongs to me. I was the assisting member of parliament or state assemblyman of this particular seat. And now you put in another new candidate. So you think that post belongs to you, see? You attach to it. So when the moment you are not nominated, you got angry already. Okay? So we are all having problems because we have a lot of attachment. And then the next one is thoughts of loving kindness. I don't have to elaborate on this. Thoughts of non-violence. Now, these three thoughts are very interesting here. Wisdom entails positive emotions. Right understanding and right thoughts, we say they are under the category of wisdom. And when you look at wisdom, you look at these thoughts of loving kindness, thoughts of non-violence, thoughts of detachment. These are all not cognitive domain of our human life. These are affective domain. Those of you who are teachers, you know about cognitive, affective, and psychomotor of education. Okay, the three domains of education. And you notice that these three are in the domain of affective, or we call it emotion. So wisdom entails positive emotions. And this is a point I would like to drive home because many a time I come across preachers, Dhamma preachers, who always categorize wisdom as rational part of our life, not about, never associate with the emotional part of our life. Now, so you can see the Noble Eightfold Path is not only about rational thinking, it also involves positive emotion. Okay? So, by putting two together, right understanding and right thoughts, we have this category called wisdom. Okay, and this wisdom arises from just now our mental training concentration. Okay, panya. Okay, so like I mentioned to you just now, panya, Thanissaro Bhikkhu define it as discernment. Okay, and a German scholar define it as analytical appreciative knowledge. Now you notice he used the word knowledge, but he put the word analytical and appreciative. Analytical is rational. You analyze, you think about it. Okay, but appreciative here is emotions. So it's a knowledge based on the affective and the cognitive. Okay, so here wisdom is discernment is correct. Okay, so wisdom is to know and to make known. Okay? So when you have wisdom, you say you have wisdom, then you must be able to know and to make known. Know what? To know the Four Noble Truths. Okay, since we are talking about finding ultimate happiness. And what does wisdom make known? Wisdom make known about dukkha, anicca, anatta, the three characteristics of life. Okay. I try to stop in this time, but I think I have to. Now, to develop wisdom, just like just now, mindfulness, there are techniques. So wisdom, there are also techniques. One of them is called Suttamaya Panya. To develop wisdom through listening to the Dhamma and by associating with Kalyana Mitta, associating with people who are spiritual. Okay, Kalyana Mitta, spiritual friends. Mentioned in the Mangala Sutta, Kalita Dhamma Savanam Etam Mangala Uttama. Okay, that's why I always propose, if you want to develop wisdom, to see the Four Noble Truths, to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, and you should allocate at least 15 minutes a day listening to the Dhamma. Nowadays, not necessarily listening, can always read. Okay. Now, 15 minutes a day, they will come to about 7.5 hours per month. That's about 84 hours per year. And you do that for 3 years, I think you can get enlightenment. Okay. Now, of course, just listening alone is not enough. We have the Chintamaya Panya. We have to penetrate, meaning to say we have to go deeper into it, think about it, not just listening, and analyze and go into it. And that's why in the Mangala Sutta is mentioned Kalena Dhamma Sakkacha Etam Mangala Uttamam. Frequent discussion of the Dhamma. You want to think, better don't just think alone, think with your friends, think with others. Okay? That's why we have Dhamma discussions. Because by discussing, then we can penetrate better. Okay? And not only that, be able to preach to others. You can even preach to others. Because by preaching, you also need to think. You need to go deeper. So don't wait until you say, I get enlightened, then only I preach. And in that case, nobody can preach the Dhamma. Okay? Now, then the next step is, we call it Bhavana Maya Panya, the wisdom that arises from practicing it. Based on listening and penetrating is not good enough. We must practice it. So I give an example of an apple. Okay. Now you listen to people. You listen to people about the nutrient of an apple. Okay? That is Sutta Maya. We just listen. Then, but after listening to the Sutta Maya, after listening to the people about the nutrient of an apple, you go one step further. You go deeper, you go into detail, you study all the nutrients, okay? And you can even tell people, how good is apple, that is called Chintamaya. You discuss, penetrate, you talk about this one. The advantages of eating apple and things like that. But you must go one step further. You must really eat the apple. It's called Bhavana Maya Panya. You eat the apple, then only you can benefit from it. Okay. So now I repeat the summary of this Eightfold Noble Path: right speech, right seeing, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Okay. This repeat of my earlier slide. Let you recall. Okay. This Sati also to let you recall the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, the last part I want to discuss with you. After listening to this Noble Eightfold Path, let's think about the Noble Path. Let's think. Let's penetrate deeper into the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay. We will find that Sila Samadhi Panya is a practical methodology. It's practical. Something that we can practice, we can do it ourselves. Okay. Sila Samadhi is a means to an end. It's a path. It's a way to achieve something. It does not tell you that is the end, okay? But it's a way to this. And what is the end? The end is Nibbana, okay? Nibbana Paramang Sukhang. Okay? Then Sila Samadhi Panya show us the way to it. But as I said, you don't have to wait until you finish the journey, then only you get this one. All along the way, you will realize certain degree of happiness. That's why this is the path to ultimate happiness. Is also the path of ultimate happiness. Now, if you look at Sila, Samadhi, Panya in our modern way of expression, it simply means self-discipline, development of the mind, and the attainment of wisdom, or the attainment of ability to see the true nature of this life. Okay, so this is Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Now, there are a few things we need to observe. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, or the Noble Eightfold Path, actually is one. Okay, it's one path. You cannot practice, say, I just practice Sila, I don't practice Samadhi, Panya, or I practice Samadhi, I don't practice Panya, or I have Panya, but I don't practice Sila. I cannot. The Eightfold Path is like the eight spokes of a wheel. If one spoke is broken, the wheel cannot rotate very well. Okay, there is a relationship in between these eight. Okay, but they are all mutually supporting each other. Sila prepares for Samadhi. Okay, without Sila, you cannot practice Samadhi. You know? Some people say, I want to come and practice meditation. Why? But I hate my boss. My boss give me a lot of problems. Give me a lot of stress. So I need to come and practice meditation. So when he sits down, when he closes his eyes, the boss face straight away appears. That is your Sakti. That is your remembrance. The ugly boss. Okay. So when your Sila is not in good order, you actually cannot practice Samadhi. Some people, I got a lot of family problems now. My husband, children, all give me a lot of headache. That's why I'm trying to practice meditation. My advice: go back and settle your problems first, okay, before you can practice meditation. Okay. Then Samadhi is the foundation of Panya, because when you have concentration, then you can lead you to be able to see things clearly. It's like boiling. If your mind is like boiling water, you can't see clearly. But when your mind is Samadhi, it's like clear water, it's not boiling, you can see through. Okay. So Panya sees the way. Okay? When you can see the way, the Panya see the way, then you can reinforce the Sila. Then you notice with all this wisdom, now I can practice my Sila better. Okay. I know I'm too much attached to my opinions. Now I must practice not to be attached to my opinion. I know through this Panya, I know that I have been scolding people too much. I harbor too much hatred to other people. So I must improve on this aspect. So I improve my Sila. Okay? So don't say you must finish Sila first, then only go Samadhi. Samadhi, then go Panya. These are all eight in one. That's why I call eightfold. Okay. At one time I noticed our Ministry of Education translated it as Lapan Lapis. So I quickly wrote a letter to the Deputy Minister of Education, Ong Chung Kim at that time. I told him, 8 jalan benar cukup lah, tak payah 8 lapis. Lu ingat itu kau tingkui ya? Okay. Now I give an example. Sila without Samadhi Panya can be very dangerous. Well, many people say Sila, do good, avoid evils lah. Do good. But what is good? When you don't have Panya, then you think by slaughtering people, by bombing people, sending people to heaven, you also will go to heaven. And these people whom you have killed will also go to heaven. This is without Panya. So, especially religious people, you know, if you are so-called religious people, but you don't have Samadhi Panya, it's very dangerous. Because you see things wrongly, but you think you are doing good. Okay? And in Buddhism, we say avoid evils, do good, purify the mind. Okay? Sabba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sacitta paryodapanang etang mangulam hetang udadas dasana. Okay? So avoid evils, do good, purify the mind. So you see, an important aspect of Buddhism is to purify the mind. Many religious philosophy, ideologies in this world talk about avoid evil, do good, but seldom they talk about purify the mind. And this is the problem. Because everybody think they are doing good, but the mind is not pure. So it can lead you to the wrong direction. So to a putujana, to a lay person like us, The Sila Samadhi Panya can be summarized as very simple. Okay, Sila means good thoughts, good speech, good action. Okay, our mind, use our mind, watch our mind, focus our mind. Okay, and wisdom, to learn, to think, and to practice. Okay, to learn, to think, and to practice. Then you can develop wisdom. Okay? You know, to learn, I always say to youngsters today, especially, must learn how to read and write. Despite our education getting more and more sophisticated, I notice many young people today cannot read and write properly also. Okay. Okay. And to think also must to talk. So I always say, read and write, think and talk. We must be able to talk and talk a lot. Some people say don't talk too much. If the Buddha didn't talk too much, how can we have the three baskets or the sanjang today? Now we notice that the path to ultimate happiness, or the Noble Eightfold Path, offers a completely new approach to religious practice. Why I say it's completely new approach? Because the system approach is different from others. In all other religions, you have a story. In many other religions, you have a story. For example, the Jews have a story. They say one day, from nowhere, they have started with a god. One day, the god got very bored, so he started making the earth. And then after that, he took the earth, he made Adam. And then after that, he looked at Adam, he said, Adam, you look very alone, very boring. Huh? So he made Adam slept. Then he took a rib from Adam's body, and from that make a woman. That's why from here the concept is woman belongs to man. Okay? And then Adam and Eve, they were happily fooling around in the Garden of Eden. Then came a snake. Don't know how the snake came about, but anyway, there came a snake. Then the snake told Eve to eat the apple. And after eating apple, Eve felt ashamed of herself. Hey, actually, I've been naked all the time now. God didn't cover my parts properly. So she started to cover herself. And then she also told Adam, eat the apple. So when Adam was eating the apple halfway, God came down and shouted. So the apple got stuck here at the throat here. So all the men got one apple at the throat here. This part of the story, I add one, okay? Not the original story. And then from there on, God got very angry. So he punished them. Men have to labor, support the family. Women have to bear children in the womb for 9 months, to labor for 9 months. So this was the system of thought. Thereafter, you all must pray. Then one day you can return back to me because you have committed sin by eating the apple. So that is the system of thought. This system of thought is based on myths, M-I-T-H, based on stories. Okay? Buddhism's Noble Eightfold Path is not based on stories, my dear friend, not based on stories. These are all practical methods. You can say the Buddha, when the Buddha was born, Queen Mahamaya stretched her hand and the Buddha dropped down from under her hand. Well, that kind of myth you can find in the plenty in Buddhism. But that does not affect the Noble Eightfold Path. That does not affect the core teaching, the system of thought of Buddhism. Okay, you can say the Buddha walked 7 steps. How could it be? You don't have to believe it. You can believe it for your self-enjoyment, or you don't believe it, it's okay, because that has nothing to do with the system of thought in Buddhism. Okay, so the system of thought in Buddhism, based on the Noble Eightfold Path, is on a practical experience, not imagination, not myths or speculative philosophy. And it emphasizes on the path rather than the destination. We talk a lot about the methodology. We tell you how to go. Just like you have not been to the North Pole, we tell you how to go to the North Pole, but we don't give you a description of how the North Pole looks like. That's why we seldom talk about Nibbana. When you reach there, you can see for yourself. Now, if I describe to you and you have no experience, all sorts of imaginations arise in your mind. And that's not good. Okay. Now it's mentioned, it's very interesting to notice in the Noble Eightfold Path, is no mention of the triple gems. It must mention that you must believe in the triple gems. So to me, this is also good because that means this Noble Eightfold Path is applicable to all regardless of religious labels. Okay? Of course, if we go penetrate deeper into it, then we can realize that when we say Sati, one of the objects, or rather the objects of Sati can be Buddhanusati, can be Dhamma-sati, can be Sangha-nusati, can be the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha can be our object of mindfulness. Okay? And there is no mention of rites and rituals. I don't have to put flowers, joysticks, and things like that. I don't have to have restart processions and things like that. It is not mentioned in the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay? But today, since Buddhism has become a religion, we have all these rites and rituals to make our life more interesting. Okay? So again, the Noble Eightfold Path has no mention of external forces as a means of liberation. It is our own effort. Okay? Again, no mention of chanting, prayer, all these things as a means of salvation. Okay? But of course, if you want, you can always interpret it as Tara techniques, okay, used in the practicing of the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, that's the end. Exceeded by 5 minutes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Brother Dato Engineer Ang, for this very interesting Dhamma talk. Perhaps we can have a little bit of time for question and answers. Brothers and sisters in the Dhamma, if you have any questions or comment, please put in the chat. I've got one comment or one question from the email for Brother Dato. When we practice the Noble Eightfold Path, do we need to follow according to Sila, Samadhi, and Panya by progressing in this linear manner?
I already mentioned just now.
Okay.
I would rather say it goes in a spiral form.
Sure.
Spiral form. Instead of, if I say in a round circle, you may find it difficult to understand. But if you go in a spiral form, of course, we always start off with Sila, then Samadhi, Panya. And if you analyze, that is how it works. Okay, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. But if you want to perfect your Sila, then we need to go to Samadhi. That is impossible. Okay, you want to perfect your Samadhi, then we need to Panya. That is impossible. You have to go in a spiral form. Means to say you have to practice some Sila, then you practice some Samadhi, then you have some Panya. You have some degree of Panya arise, then you have more faith. Then you practice more Sila, then you have more Samadhi, then you have more Panya. So you have to go in a spiral form. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, brother. Just a comment, because I did hear some Dhamma talks before. I just need your advice on this. It is said that you have not entered the Noble Eightfold Path if you don't have right view. What do you think about this statement? Is it something that is the way it is, or like you explained earlier?
You have not entered the Noble Eightfold Path
if you don't have right view at the beginning.
Well, if you have, I don't quite agree with this because a path is something that a path is a methodology, a technique. Okay, so you have to start somewhere.
Sure.
You can't say I don't have this, I cannot use this method. Then in that case, I think most of us don't have right views. So from the beginning, at first, all of us don't have right view. So how can we enter the path? So we got to enter the path somewhere. Okay?
And progressively, then we have a better understanding, perhaps come to right view, probably.
Yeah, as we enter the path, then we can get a better view. We'll get a better view later, you see.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Just check and see if there's any chats. Brothers, sisters, if you still have any comments or questions, please do put in the chat. Just another point to note. These three characteristics of life, that is anicca, dukkha, anatta. I think the first two are a little bit easier to understand. But the third one, anatta, may be a bit difficult to comprehend. I think it does not mean no self, because everybody have a self, right? But it's always changing. So it means more like not self or non-self. Perhaps brother could just elaborate on this a little bit more.
If we look at a car,
Okay.
then we say that is a car. That's the self of a car. But when you dismantle the car completely, then there's no car. Okay, that's why the no self is like this. There is no car. Okay, but actually there is a car when you put all the components together. Anisaboro Bhikkhu use the word fabrication. When you put all these component parts together, then we mistaken it as a self. But in reality, there's no self. So when we look at our human bodies, in Buddhism we say we have the panchakanda or the 5 aggregates.
Okay.
We put the 5 aggregates together, that is called our self. But when you look at it seriously or look at penetrating it seriously, there is no self. So that is why in the Mahayana Buddhism, they later developed it into the concept of sunyata or emptiness or kong. Emptiness is also wrong translation.
Okay.
Because kong means essentially means no self.
No self. Yeah. Okay.